When I meet an advisor, I'm like, oh, did you read Kitces this week? And they're like, Kitces who? I'm like, we're done. I gotta stop talking. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RA Podcast. I am your host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me today, a man who needs no introduction, though Michael, I'm surprised when people don't know who you are. That's like my threshold.
So, I appreciate it. No, we got to get the word out to more people. Not everybody has read the content yet, so we'll keep putting it out there and introducing more advisors to it.
I love it. Well, Michael, it's such an honor to have you on the show again. I've been on your show a couple of times. Of course, do amazing work with Kitces.com, which strikes me to this day, Michael, as this amazing labor of love, right? So obviously there's a membership component, which I've been a member as long as there's been a membership, but you've got an incredible team there. You must still put a lot of time into Kitces.com. Oh, yes. Tell us a little bit about that as it is today, right? I mean, you've been doing it now 15 years?
Yeah, I guess 15 years for 15? The site in its current version. Like basically that website launched in early 2008 for actually what was originally just the front end to what was going to be a premium newsletter business. Just That's like we'd send you a PDF once a month with some long form content because that was the era of it. The blog only came a few years later, and Nerd's Eye View and all the growth came after that as we morphed it into a member section. So it's gone through a lot of iterations. But yeah, version 1.0 was 2008. So we're 15 years into it at this point.
And 2017 is when you kicked off the Advisor Success podcast, and now you're on episode 343 or something. I think aired last week. But it's really coming along. Well, I would love to chat today, Michael, about everyone's burning question. Whenever your name comes up amongst groups of advisors, when you're not there, the question I always hear is, does Michael sleep? And so I'd love to talk about not necessarily your sleep schedule specifically, but
I get that a lot. So much so we actually put a thing up on the website at one point of my Fitbit sleep schedule readout just to prove I really do sleep. In fact, I get really grumpy when I don't sleep. I need 8 hours of sleep. Although I am one of those folks wired for night owl, very much not a morning person. Okay. So I go to sleep at midnight and sleep until about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I am not fast to get going in the morning. So all those your most productive hours or all the things you do before 7 a.m. I'm asleep. If I see 7 a.m., it's more likely because I've not yet gone to sleep than because I woke up in the morning. More power to the people who are, of course, productive in the morning, but just I am so not wired that way. But I do pack a lot into my days. And for me, that's been an interesting evolution unto itself. I mean, I think all of us go through some version of this, building any type of business. The business goes, right? First, you launch. Oh my gosh, I hope anybody shows up. I hope any clients engage me. I need any revenue because any revenue is better than not revenue. And you get through that initial phase and all of a sudden it's okay, all right, the numbers are, the math's okay. I'm going to make it. I don't have to quit this and go back and find a job somewhere else. And then it grows a little more. It's this is getting kind of good. Dollars are adding up pretty well. I'm feeling pretty good. I made this decision. And then for almost any of us that are wired pretty well for growth, it keeps growing. And then there's sort of this all right, well, now it's kind of getting a lot. And well, now it's kind of getting a lot. And okay, now it's getting a little hectic here. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so as I hit some of those crossroads and thresholds, it was a big challenge to me because for the first almost 10 years of my career, I lived in the advisory world. Part of my role was teaching and training our advisors that were coming up. I was director of financial planning in a firm, so delivered all the plans, did all that client-facing work, but then I was the one teaching and training all the advisors coming in. So I essentially had direct reports that I had to manage and nurture and develop. And pretty much figured out this stage of my career, I'm not good at managing people. That is, give me some tax law. I'll hang out with that for a couple of hours. But the weekly one-on-ones and the performance reviews and just all the things that you need to do to manage team well, that was certainly not my happy space. In the whole, what do you get energy from? That was energy draining for me, not energy granting. And more generally, just I can reflect back on it I was not that good at it. So the mental script that I kind of had, I guess head trash and TPR world, was I can't manage people. Therefore, I can't build a team around me.
Interesting.
Therefore, I have to keep doing all this stuff myself.
Yeah.
And just try to be as efficient as I can. So I got really good with tech efficiency. I did ultimately take on like one right-hand person to help with some of the administrative, operational, bookkeeping and stuff, like the very, very tasky stuff.
Sure.
Because frankly, I found someone who is incredibly good at just getting stuff done and being adaptive themselves, right? The proverbial, like, I like to manage people who don't need to be managed very much, right? Like I lived a little bit of that journey. And it went okay for a number of years of the business continuing to grow until I got to some point and I really was on the borderline, like, when do I sleep? There's no time to sleep, because I was effectively working 7 days a week, all hours of the day and night. Just trying to keep things going, and sort of that, like, never been more successful, never thought I would make this much money at any point in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not enjoying how many hours I'm working. Like, I'm a pretty hardcore worker. Like, I do put in more hours than the average bear, but like, not feeling good about how many hours I was spending. And so
you were constantly on the road too, right? Because I mean, at your peak, you were doing what, 40 or 50 conferences a year? Some crazy.
At the peak, I was north of 70 conferences a year. I was in the 70 to 75 range. So like on average, 1 or 2 a week, every week. In practice, there's some quiet seasons, like no one does conferences during the winter holidays and such, which just means during busy season, like, May, June, September, October, early November, like 3 conferences, 4 conferences, sometimes a week after week after week. And then like writing articles and getting stuff done from the airplane while I'm going. And at that point, like I was still affiliated back to the advisory firms, like still doing client business development and bringing clients to the firm and still sitting in on client cases. So absolutely, utterly bonkers with all of it. And so I got to the point where, like, just trying to figure out how to get hold of it, I came on the, I guess now, like the famous Stephen Covey analogy of managing time, of rocks, pebbles, and sand. I don't know if this is a familiar one for your audience.
Classic, yeah.
So, if you imagine like a glass jar, like a mason jar in front of you, fixed container of space. Everybody's got the same amount. Like the jar, size of the jar, size of the jar, and you cannot change the size of the jar because it's fixed glass, right? Like we all get the same 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 168 hours a week. Nobody gets any more or less time. Like it is what it is. You get to choose how you fill it. So in the Covey telling of this, so you can think of the things that you have to do in sort of 3 broad categories. The first are the big rocks, like the few big meaty things we can do that move our lives forward, that move our businesses forward, that move our careers forward. Then there's the pebbles. The pebbles are kind of the medium-sized things. They're important. They've got some urgency. We got to deal with them. It's not big life-changing things, but like, this has to get checked today or this week. And then there's the sand. The sand is just like the never-ending stream of minutia that's always coming at you. It's the emails and the social media tweets and the phone notifications and all the random one-offs and the people who pop your head in your office if you're in person and say like, hey, can I grab you for a minute? Now, the reality for any human being is there is more rocks, pebble, and sand than there is space in the jar.
Yes.
There's always more to do than there is time in the day, week, month of the year, in part because the frickin' sand never stops coming at you. Like you can go down the social media rabbit hole as many hours in the day as you want. It never ends.
Nope.
There's no bottom to that. You just decide when you're cutting yourself off or redirecting your time. So the challenge for what most people do is that much of the jar gets filled with the sand because it just kind of passively happens. Then you go like, oh crap, there's some things I need to get done today. So you start putting some pebbles in. So if you imagine like glass jar, bottom, whatever, third or half is filled with sand. Then you start putting in some medium-sized pebbles. Then you pick up this big old rock. That's like the really important thing that's going to take weeks or months to do, but could really move you forward. It ain't fitting in there because the jar is mostly crowded out by all the pebbles sitting across from the sand. So the whole framing, as Covey tells it, is that if you want to conquer this, the whole point is you have to put in the big rock first. Right? So if you like pour the mason jar out, empty jar again, you put in a big rock first. Then you start putting in the pebbles. They'll fall around the rock, right? They'll find their open space. And then you pour in the sand. And the sand will fill in every nook and cranny that's in there because sand's really good at doing that. But by definition, because you put the big rock in first, it will get done. And because you put the pebbles in second, it will get done. The only thing that gets edged out is the sand. Because you put it in last. And so it's this whole like place the big rocks first, prioritize the big rocks, sort of like eat your frogs first if you follow that methodology as well. And so I really got into this. It was like, okay, so if I looked at my calendar, like took an honest look at my calendar, it's like, look, there's certain set of things that I got to do throughout the year. Like there were days that I would set that just, well, like, look, this is a travel day. So like, I'm going to be on the road. I can't do my thing. This is a writing day. I got to sit down and do some writing. These are client days. Like I still need some number of days that I'm going to be sitting across from clients and prospects doing my thing there. I've got a couple of like work on the business days. I had at that point, like some days back to XY Planning Network because we're now like 2015, 2016 when they're just starting to get busy. So I sat down and went through the whole thing, was like, if I just add these up, like how many speaking days do I have committed? How many days do I need to write? How many client days do I need to do that work? How many XYPN days do I need? How many other work on the business days do I need? So I went all the way through. It was 353 days.
I was waiting for that. Like, wait, it's got to be more than there are days in the year. Yeah.
Fortunately, it didn't add up to more than days in the year. But I'm like, I'm like, so I feel like I'm always working and basically like I can't take off anything except maybe like Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day. It was like, oh, apparently that's entirely accurate. That's why I feel that way. Like I have so overloaded this jar because I didn't have any way to measure it. I mean, to me, like the essence of it was at the increment, like, oh, here's a cool opportunity and I'm a hard worker. So yes, here's a cool opportunity. I'm a hard worker. So yes, like I just kept layering it on. It wasn't until I had some framework to sit back and say, what does this add up to? And it's like, oh, well, that's why I work like 75 hours a week. Like, okay, now the math makes sense. And then I had to figure out how to unbury myself.
Yeah.
Which took years, which literally took years, because by the time I made the commitments that I've made and the structure that I built, like I was only willing to move it so quickly at a time and not disrupt some businesses that always really did have very good momentum. And so I spent probably a good 4+ years.
Wow. Okay.
Rejiggering that, just trying to get down to like, okay, now it only adds up to 300 days, which basically means I can get my Sundays back. So I'll always have one day a week with my family. Then trying to get it down to like, what would it look like if it's only 275 or 250? Now we're getting down to like, I can actually have weekends with my family. That took literally years of what became an exercise at the beginning of every year where I would literally make like a calendar for the year. Just pull like a template off the internet.
Yep.
And just start coloring every day of the year, like speaking day, client day, speaking day, writing day, work on the business day, XYPN day, all the way through the year until I could go through the exercise and it didn't add up to more days than there were work days in the year. And that was the only way I found that I was able to get like to work back from the overwhelm. Because otherwise, just like there's, when you're in the thick of it, there's really no good way to get like the high level view of what's going on and where your time is going. And that ultimately just took me down a road of getting what now is like very hyper cognizant of exactly where my time goes. I keep everything on my calendar of where my time is going and what I'm doing and what I'm working on.
Interesting.
And actually have my executive assistant keep an ongoing spreadsheet every week of where did my time go across all the different dimensions. I catalog like 15 plus different dimensions. Now, because I don't want the sands on my calendar, I've delegated it to her and she catalogs my calendar. I don't want to make my spreadsheet because I don't feel that was a good use of my time. But seeing the output of that spreadsheet was critical. And so now when I get a lot of the questions of like, how do you get all the stuff done that you do? The answer is I've gotten really, really good at prioritizing exactly where my time goes to maximize the impact of what I'm doing across what now are all the different businesses that I've involved with. Because I've got Kitces stuff, I've got Buckingham Strategic Partners, I've got XY Planning Network, I've got AdvicePay, I got FP Pathfinder, I've got New Planner Recruiting. So I had to get even more cognizant of figuring out in that true sense, like what is your, right? As we always ask ourselves business owners, like what is the highest and best use of your time in the business? And recognizing that the only way I can even hold myself accountable to it is it has to get documented, and I can't be the one that does it, because if I do it, I'm like,
it was pretty
fudging a little. You like give yourself the benefit of the doubt on some things. I'm like, nope. Reese catalogs it all for me. She does it in like the boldest, strictest sense that I have directed her to do. Like, you got to hold me accountable. Like, show me where the time went, and if I was screwed off in things, like reflect that back to me so that I can own it. And that ultimately is now where the productivity drives. Like it's not, I mean, yes, I still work a little bit more hours on average than most people, because these days I'm about a 55-hour week, if I get honest. So that's basically like 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. most days, sometimes 9 to 7, because as I said, I'm not the most early riser. And then about 2 or 3 hours Saturday and Sunday mornings while the kids are out and doing stuff. And if you get honest, like even for all the people that say like, I work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, I'm like, I've documented what it looks like when you actually work that many hours. Most people don't work that many hours.
No.
They say it, but then like, well, yeah, you worked an 11-hour day, but 4 hours of it was on social media. Like, you weren't really getting a lot of stuff. You could have worked in 7 hours and gone home.
Yeah,
You spent 11 hours because you were hanging out on social media and doing some other stuff that was probably not, or like writing a long email to someone that could have gotten a short email or didn't even really actually need to get a response to you because it wasn't that important, but you felt you had time and you did it. I document all that stuff just so I can always understand where is the time going and am I putting it in the best place? Because the real driver around productivity is not, the cool technology apps to like make some things a few seconds faster. It is focus management. It's 100%. Like, what are you doing with the time that really does the most to grow the business and move it forward?
Michael, I want to draw out two things that you said. I heard that the analogy of the glass and the rocks and the pebbles and the sand from Stephen Covey, right? Forever ago, right? He probably came up with that.
Yeah. I mean, he's done it forever. I unfortunately completely missed it until 2015 when I drowned myself in work capacity. But like, it really works. It's hard to be honest with yourself about it, but it really works.
Well, that's what I wanted to pull out. The two things. One is I had never thought about this, and you're spot on. There is no, like I always envisioned in my mind that you had like 1 cup of sand and 1 cup of rocks, and you need to decide the order. But to your point, there is no end to sand. If you blink, the entire jar will fill up with sand every single day, no matter what. And then I love this second part you just mentioned again, this being honest with yourself and really acknowledging that you probably can't be honest with yourself about your time. You've got to have somebody else be on there. And to your point, hey, you were in the office for 11 hours, but 4 of those were screwing around on social media. You didn't really work 11 hours.
Yeah. Or, I sent all these all this work I did. I sent all these emails. And like, okay, well, let's really go through like how many of those emails really needed to be sent, or like how many of them did you do because we love connecting with people because we're people in the advisor business. And like, I sent a bunch of emails off to people. It's like, okay, let's be honest. Like 2 or 3 of them, you didn't really need to reinforce that relationship. 1 or 2 of them, you probably could have written a short email, but you wrote a long one because you just like writing and saying a lot of things if we're writing inclined. And then a few of them really probably weren't priority to do today. They easily could have been done a week from now and nobody would have known the difference. And just by the time you go through all of that, an immense amount of time slips. I mean, to me, indirectly, it's one of the reasons why surging works so well for a lot of people when they come back to it. It's like, because when you surge, you can't fit any sand in there. Like, you have to do all that stuff or it's not happening. And to me, it's the essence of like, you just stack a whole bunch of rocks on top of each other. There's no room for the sand. And when you stack the rocks that much and you look around, you're like, I got like 8 months left in the year now. Like, that's really it. It's like, yeah, that's how much sand was filling the gears that you didn't realize until you create a structure that forces out the sands to get the rock work done. And then you pick your head up and look around. You're like, wow, there's a lot of time left when I actually just get the rocks done in a really efficient manner.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The sand, like you said, is of unlimited quantity and it just comes at us, right? And this is not to bemoan social media or technology companies or anything else, but the sand is incredibly seductive. Like it has a lure, unlike the addictiveness of that sand is incredible.
Literally like engineered it to be more addictive, right? It's the notifications, the pings, the vibrate. It's got like haptic feedback. I mean, like it is It's not an accident. Like they made it to trigger all the dopamine receptors. But when I look at it even from that perspective, so like almost all of my phone notifications are off.
Yep.
I don't take any because
you can't.
Frankly, I'm fairly severe ADHD. Like you pop notifications up, like my afternoon's blown at that point.
I'm done,
There are no email notifications on my desktop. No software on my desktop is capable of generating any notification to me at all to insert its sand into my life, except my executive assistant, if she pings me, my managing director at the Kitces platform, if she pings me, Alan Moore, because he's got like the beeline to me of all the XYPN advice pay stuff, and my wife. Like 4 people in my life can get a notification to me. And that's basically it. Anybody else, I'm going to try to get back to you in a timely manner, but like I'm going to look on my terms, on my time, so that I don't get pulled out of what I don't need to focus on. Likewise, I don't even primarily field my email. My executive assistant fields my email and tells me which ones I need to look at and go to, which was horrifically awkward for me to get comfortable with early on. I couldn't imagine anybody actually being in my email inbox. And now like I'm miserable when she goes on vacation for a day and I have to fend my own email inbox off for a day. And like I still respond to stuff. She's very good at helping to make sure here's the things that you need to respond to. But the reality is we get so much email, there's so much spam, there's so much newsletters, there's so many things. So I'm like, I'm just gonna like rabbit trail on this for a few minutes. And then you read an article and then it's hyperlinked to another article. So you read that because that was interesting. Now that's 40 minutes of my life gone. And just it's so easy to wander away from the focus that to me, part of it is then what do you do to keep the zone to your focus? So like all the notifications come off. I don't get into my email inbox. I do not get any social media notifications. I'm pretty engaged there because when I set some time on my calendar to say, go check it on my social media, I go check it on my social media, but there's no notification to me that comes to it. So like the dopamine cycle isn't flowing and I can keep control of my time so that I'm tackling the rocks that need to be tackled and I'm getting exactly much sand as I want and can have time to get after everything else has been prioritized. And there is some, because like if you pack every minute of the day with rocks and urgent stuff, like you're going to tire yourself out. So I need breaks and breathers and all that as well, where I'll pull out my phone or pop up social media and interact a little bit. But it's always on my terms with directed focus.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing the detail on that, right? There's an incredible amount of discipline or really forcing mechanisms, right? And you're not saying don't do those things. Don't do social media, don't do email. You're saying just do them on your terms, not on the terms. And you mentioned this earlier when you talked about, success ramping up, right? So I think about the success you've had, but also then, and not to blow smoke, but the impact that you have had and continue to have on the industry that would just be one fraction of what it is now if you said, you know what, I'll just spend my day reading email. Like there could be like in some alternate dimension, there's a version of Michael Kitces that just reads email all day. And the rest of us don't get to read kitces.com and to see and all these different things you've spun up. So I don't know. It's just fascinating for me to see that you've applied this incredible amount of discipline and the impact for your family and for an entire industry has been incredible.
Well, I do appreciate that. But I would highlight like people like to frame it a lot as discipline. I'm like, no, I'm not disciplined. That's why I turned all the notifications off.
That's a good point.
I'm not disciplined. That's why I'm barred from my own email inbox. And someone has to tell me which ones to respond to. I'm like, I didn't, there was a long time where I beat the crap out of myself sort of mentally and psychologically of like, damn it, why can't you focus more? Why can't you focus more? And again, like I've got a lifetime of some ADHD baggage I've carried. So like I've spent a lifetime beating myself up over why can't you focus more? The shift was like, I stopped doing that to myself. I said like, well, just change the system around you so that those temptations and distractions aren't there. And like, then I don't need discipline. Like I don't need the discipline to ignore my social media. I just don't get any notifications. Like I don't need the discipline to avoid rabbit trailing in my email inbox. I'm not the first one to field it. And there's a whole training process around how you get team members up to speed so that I do see the things that I need to see and don't miss any of that stuff because that's really important. I still have a thing from an authenticity and like you will never get an email from me that was not from me. Like no one, it's field like it's triaged on my behalf. No one responds on my behalf. Like I take that stuff very seriously to respond for me. But there's a never-ending stream of email. So and I like helping people. So if I sit in my email inbox, I'm just going to reply to them all day long, and I'm not going to get done the things I need to get done. So to me, like it's less about discipline and more about how do you create the systems around you so that the temptations aren't there, and then like you don't need to be disciplined. You just focus on the only thing that's in front of you anyways, because you set that as the priority.
I love it. Well, Michael, thank you for giving us a peek behind the curtains and sharing with us the systems that you have put in place. For all our listeners, I'd say take Michael's advice to heart. Don't worry about discipline, or don't beat yourself up on discipline. Put some forcing mechanisms in place and make it happen. So,
Amen.
Michael, thank you so much, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.